Welcome to Future Proof, the marketing podcast from Kantar, the world's leading marketing data and analytics company, and Side Business School, University of Oxford. In each episode, we speak with marketing leaders and share insights to help brands and business leaders navigate the ever-changing marketing landscape and hopefully dispel some myths and misconceptions along the way. So our guest today is Nick Daniel, and Nick is ex-CMO of Dogs Trust. So Nick, I'm delighted to welcome you on our podcast. Dogs are a kind of eternally popular topic, but I guess it's different when your actual job is to work with them and to support them. So can you tell us a bit about you and a bit about Dogs Trust and what you do?
Sure thing. And hello. It's even if it's your job, you still dogs are awesome. So I'm currently director of an independent marketing consultancy called Flying Foxes that specialises on sort of helping brands in drive choice in a competitive marketplace. But as you say, for a decade before that, I was the CMO at Dogs Trust. For those who don't know, Dogs Trust is the UK's largest dog charity. They have amazing rehoming centres all over the four regions of the UK. And they're known for being positive, being yellow, speaking in the voice of a dog, a dog is for life, and a non-destruction policy. But in their history, although they've been around for 130 years, for the vast majority of that, they were completely unknown. So we're actually a bit of a sort of like a bit more of a startup. So in the last sort of 20, 30 years is when Dogs Trust really started being different and driving choice. And as a result of everything, working with an amazing team, in the last 10 years, we've grown the brand massively. We're the fastest growing brand on the charity brand index since their records began. I'm a big firm believer of drive the brand, drive the income. And that drive and growth in the spontaneous awareness has led to, in the last 10 years, a £50 million growth in income on an annual basis. And now Dogs Trust is a top 10 charity in the UK.
Wow. So charity sector marketing, it's not something we've covered a lot on the Future Proof podcast. So can you tell us what its kind of quirks are? What's different about the charity sector that we need to know about and understand? And are there any trends that we should be aware of?
So in terms of quirks, I suppose the biggest one is it's an intangible product. There's which isn't a quirk in and of itself. But I suppose the additional quirk of being intangible against some products is that actually the person buying the product doesn't receive the benefit. It's a selfless act, although you do feel warm and fuzzy inside as a result of doing it. And then I suppose the other one is we can't set the price. And that really hit charities during the cost of living crisis, because charities stand up and help some sort of sponsor group. And cost of living hit most charities in three ways. Obviously, their own prices went up. And for animal welfare charities, it went up faster than traditional inflation because dog food and cost of veterinary care all went up faster than the rates of inflation. Then, of course, the supporters themselves are hit, therefore they don't give, and you can't move your price to try and drive your profit margins. Right. But also that's the point when demand increases. So for Dogs Trust, we were getting 2,000 calls every week for people wanting to try and hand over their dogs. And even though we are by far the largest, that's a capacity level we can't cope with. So I think the other big trend, I think that you're talking about for us, is the changing landscape we live in terms of the world we live in. Obviously, tech, and we're all struggling with technology. Just Trudeau said, the pace of change has never been this fast, but it'll also never be this slow again. So we're all going, oh my God, I can't cope. So the other one is, I suppose, the individual trends, but also the fact that commercial sector is now sort of living in our world a little bit. The old days of commercial bad and charity good, so many commercial brands are thriving on delivering good in their missions. In fact,
as they discover purpose and
absolutely. Yeah. So it's getting a bit fuzzy that they're stealing our lane a little bit. So it's a very interesting world right now.
So in a sort of marketing landscape, how would you describe your competitors at Dogs Trust? Are they sort of all firmly in your category, or are you saying other household brands in your competitive set as well?
Yeah, I am by nature, as everyone will tell you, quite a competitive soul. So
Surely not.
most people in the charity sector don't like talking about competition. No, we're not in competition. Everybody's lovely and we can all do good. But I'm a big believer in the zero-sum game. And if for me to win, something or someone has to lose. So no, competition is our game. So the primary ones for us are the big animal welfare charities, so the RSPCA, Battersea, and even Cats Protection. And all of those recently in the last sort of 3 or 4 years have gone through massive rebrand processes to try and necessarily change their ways to compete with us a little bit because of the success we had, and driving love and positivity has been a real factor for us. I don't like the guilt systems that some charities use. I believe in sort of like it's creating a sort of compassion fatigue. And so I've always been of the mind of we create a brand that goes, we're going to look after the dogs. Do you want to come along for the ride? Rather than the classic old story of, if you don't give, will this dog survive? So that's been quite interesting journey as they've come into our space. Obviously, the RSPCA being the latest to rebrand. But then also the rest of the charity sector is competition. But I'm actually more worried about, as I said before, the commercial sector, as they channel good. And so you see brands like Pedigree, brands like Pets at Home. Pets at Home deliver a program that supports loads of charities that does good. Pedigree's adverts talk about rehoming. So it's an interesting competitive world right now. Yeah,
fascinating. And I suppose another thing that you have is you have centres, and there are shops, to create a presence for Dogs Trust. Can you tell us a bit more about those and what they do for the brand?
Yeah, sure. I'll do it in 2 sections. Just talk about the shops for first of all. So we built a small but perfectly formed network of shops, and they're slightly different to the normal charity shop. We try and make it feel a little bit more boutique-y. Like every other charity shop, what they do is turn unwanted products into loved products and bought in by people. So I suppose there's a direct parallel between what the centres are doing and what the shops do, in the fact that they turn unloved things into loved things that go into, they rehome products. And the shops generally are turning a healthy profit. During lockdown and beyond, our shops were struggling in lockdown because, of course, they had to close and open. But during the cost of living crisis, charity shops have had a bit of a boom. But it's bigger than that. The high street presence of having Dogs Trust in a location, we can show that in addition to the direct income, it has a real halo for the charity, and that general donations around the area around a shop will thrive at a greater level. And consideration towards considering the charity in your will thrive as well. So the shops themselves are amazing in terms of both driving income, but also driving that brand halo. But the centres, I think, for us are the ones that make the big difference. Because charities, back to the intangible product, quite a lot of charities don't have a physical thing that they can talk about. So having a physical manifestation of your money delivers this change, your money gets that tail wagging, and so you can walk around the centre and you'll instantly be beating your heart, be passionate, because you just see amazing people doing amazing things for dogs, and a whole stream of amazing people, I'll use the word amazing too much, but walking in to rehome dogs and making it all work. So you could just physically see that in action. There are very few charities that have something like that. So, it's a bit like the RNLI and the lifeboat stations, and seeing the guys going out, you can see your money doing good. And I think that's so important, because everything that we do is only done as a result of public donations. So seeing that money in action is really critical to carrying that going. And we all went through the cost of living crisis. We all looked at our bank balances and went, what can I cut? And being in that passion space and that heart space and seeing it real meant that we potentially sort of didn't get cut out of the bank account as quickly as others.
Okay. And so a related question, I guess, which is, how do you build the regular giving, which presumably is the mainstay of an organisation like Dogs Trust? How do you sort of make those into programs that connect with people?
Not everyone does, but it's the closest way that we can get to create a tangible product, get something physical and real so people connected. So a lot of people do create, we call them products, but they're not really products. But so number one is, for me, has always been about that positivity piece, create some differentiation, but also make people want to join you. It's about getting people to connect with your why. Simon Sinek talks about the golden circle of why, how, and what. Focus on the why, get people to buy your why. So we obviously have a promise, which is we'll never put a healthy dog down. And we create the products necessarily to make people feel they are directly contributing to that why, to that beating heart. I believe that a healthy dog should never be put to sleep. So and they can see how their contribution is changing a life. So what dog sponsorship is just this amazing, cute thing of, we have 42 dogs on the scheme at any one time. Those dogs are the ones that probably will find it harder to find a home. A little bit too much has happened to them, and they're totally healthy physically and mentally, but as something in the outside world would trigger them. So we are still trying to find them homes. That's not so these 42 dogs, and members of the public can pick one of these 42 dogs, and it's the closest thing you can get to remotely owning a dog as you possibly can. And so people do feel a deep connection to their dog. Those 42 dogs have unique 42 tones of voice, and they do write letters to the donors. And we make it a really big, important piece, increasingly in the digital world, of making things physical. So the dog will be on a fridge magnet that stays in the house, and 3 times a year they'll get things from us, from the dog, but there'll be things that have a bit of a shelf life, a Valentine's card that ends up on a mantelpiece, a Christmas decoration that ends up on the Christmas tree, that just means it has a little bit more shelf life and the dog is present. So I've been to some donors' houses for conversations, and you'll see photo frames of their sponsor dogs over the years, as if they're talking about grandchildren, so it just creates that deeper connection, to a point where every Christmas we get about 5,000 or 6,000 individual gifts for the dogs, which we have to distribute out across the centres. People are continually writing letters to the dogs in the centres. And the benefit of it for us is that then what happens is that people go on to stick around for a while. So our tenure of people, getting people to connect to the why we do it rather than what we do and how we do, means that they stick around and support us for the longer term. And it has compared to other organisations, our tenure is pretty positive.
Great. And tell us a bit about the Companion Club. What's that about?
Companion Club at the moment is effectively our sort of a pseudo membership scheme where people don't quite get as many benefits, but the idea of it and how it will evolve will probably be in the idea of it's the dog owner's product. So at the moment, the benefits are, you get access to Vet Phone, which is a 24/7 emergency vet service where you can speak to a vet nurse or a vet, and it's sort of an out of hours care on the little things that are niggling you. My dog's just eaten some chocolate. Do I need to go and see the vet right now?
Yeah,
and that's probably the most common question we get. Just so you know, the answer to that one is, if it was dairy milk, you're okay, but if it was a deep 70% chocolate, go and get to your vet right now. But it's more of a dog owner's product, and it also offers a £1 million worth of third-party insurance. So if your dog was to sort of knock someone over or something like that, you're sort of covered for us.
Okay.
It's been we've struggled with it a little bit recently because of the changes to the Dangerous Dog Act, in that they've made it a requirement that people have the third-party insurance. We are now the only people in the UK that offer it. So people have been taking out our membership product to cover their dog, to enable it protects itself from that. So it's we're sort of doing a DEFRA service for them at the moment, and that's causing a little bit of a challenge. But the idea is it's for the dog owner.
And to talk about let's talk a bit more about, some of the things that have happened that affect, dog ownership and, how dogs behave. And so obviously there was a bit of a rush during COVID for people to get dogs. Some of them rescued dogs, some of them bred puppies or whatever. I was one of them, actually, got a dog, a lovely dog, Zoe, from Romania. But there was a huge increase in dog ownership around that time. But then there's other things going on, like puppy farms and smuggling. And so how do you deal with all of those issues?
I think, like any organisation, you just have to be reactive to meet that. COVID was an interesting one in that people wanted dogs. People were coming to our centre, banging the door. I don't care what, I just need a dog. And if you remember, at one point, we were only allowed out the house to walk the dog. Yep. So what happened during COVID was, roughly speaking, an additional 1 million dogs came into the UK dog population. The trend for that was they were younger owners, first-time buyers, first-time owners of a dog, and at a time where they couldn't really access veterinary care easily and dog training. So I'm new to dogs, I'm younger, less dependency type thing issues, and then not accessing the right care meant that when the cost of living crisis hit, those same people weren't in control of their own abilities. If the office says you need to come back to work, they had to go. And that led to those 2,000 calls a week, but also financially, they're not as stable. But what it did, it was exacerbated probably the biggest challenge that the sector's facing is a change in dog behaviour. There's loads of reasons why it's happening. Part of it is how we treat our dogs. Some people treat their dog as a child now. It's, you can judge sort of where they are on their emotional space with their dog, as you can ask the question, where does your dog sleep? And it can go from, outside, in the kitchen with the door shut, all the way to just downstairs into in the bedroom, on the bed. And then you get the really, really cute, cuddly one under the covers. And you can gauge someone by that. And that's changing dogs and their behaviour. So traditionally, it's for the Dogs Trust, it's all about capacity. We want to help as many dogs as we possibly can. Although our centres are amazing, they've got, ideally, we want 2 kennel dogs in a kennel. We want, each kennel has 2 spaces, an indoor space and outdoor space, partial underfloor heating to allow the dogs to move around and control their own environment. It's great. But it's nowhere near as good as being in a home with a family that love them. As a variable. So probably what is with behaviour challenges, you go from 2 dogs per kennel to 1 because he can't fit with other people. He's in the kennel for a lot longer because he needs to be trained and get over some of the behavioural issues. So the length of stay is growing. The capacity has been massively reduced. So our ability to actually help more and more and more dogs, which is the ever driver, is how do you have a greater impact, is a daily challenge. And the charities and all animal welfare charities are really trying to struggle with how do we resolve this to have the greater impact. So, the reaction to that is that how can we use potentially foster networks to take the easier dogs into a foster environment, into a home, and actually bearing in mind dogs are used to being in a home. So going to the home, it's a less stressful experience rather than going into a centre, to the point where we even have a house which is converted into small kenneling for older dogs who can live in a more family environment with other dogs. It's very cute, very lovely. But that challenge means that if we can get dogs into foster homes, the centres can be more for those deeper, needing greater change for them. But it's an evolving challenge we face. And then, as you say, and this was really in COVID, the puppy smuggling piece, demand went through the roof. So, of course, and people are very specific on the breeds they want. I want a French Bulldog, or I want a Dachshund. And at one point when the French Bulldog craze was going on, I think there were only 4 breeding pairs actually in the UK, according to the Kennel Club. So, of course, that means that you're going to get this influx of dogs, and that created the puppy smuggling challenge. So it's just, how do you react and how do you change those evolving challenges?
I suppose, in a way, coming back to the kind, you're talking about very detailed kind of operational challenges there, but also your brand has to act as a sort of beacon and a signifier what you stand for. So how you've spoken about the yellow, which is actually my memory of what Dogs Trust is. It's yellow. We talk about creation of distinctive assets and how you should be consistent over time in marketing and all your touch points. And and you alluded to it earlier actually about having a positive message and a positive tone of voice. So tell us a bit about what you think the distinctive brand assets are worth.
Yeah,
What do
sure.
they do for Dogs Trust?
If it's okay, I'll also talk about perhaps the journey as well. So when I was at the sector, the animal welfare sector is, and like all sectors, we like to copy. It's easier to copy and imitate. And I've always felt that only helps one person, that helps the market leader, and so you've always got to try and drive points of differentiation to try and drive that choice. So everyone in the sector was blue. Following on the RSPCA, even Dogs Trust was, or the National Canine Defence League as it was blue. So it's when we started acting differently, creating those distinctive assets, that the game changed. So we'll be yellow. No other charity at the time was really yellow. Yellow's the colour of positivity, and dogs are positive. You looked at the language of the RSPCA, it was very judgmental. You should see, I remember a pack, you should see the animals we have to deal with, and it was pictures of people. So we'll be positive. We'll be non-judgmental. In fact, actually, being non-judgmental is really important, because if we want someone to not abandon their dog but bring it to the centre, you've got to make that experience a positive one. If you're going to sit there and go, oh, you're so rubbish for abandoning this dog, they're not going to do it. They're not going to deal with that stress. So if others are the authoritarian, we'll just be the authority. If others are talking about the human, we'll talk about the dog. And we went nuts on dog. So we went to the point where it's the dog speaking to you. At one point, we had a DRTV commercial that had the dog speaking, and it used the word love 27 times in a 90-second ad. It was, so we say we drove positivity. We really channeled positivity. So that's one piece. But also, there aren't many brands in the charity sector that have what I would call really truly distinctive assets. They're known, whilst necessarily spontaneous awareness isn't drive, the passive types of awareness are great. But we had an expression coined by our previous chief executive, Clarissa Baldwin, which is, a dog is for life, not just for Christmas. That line has gone into pretty much everything. It's gone into the common parlance. It was in the latest James Bond movie. It's used in lots of different ways, but it's in there. And we've got something else that's unique and different in the big parts of the sector, which is the non-destruction policy. We never put a healthy dog down. So having differentiators and assets that you can rely on and really land quickly your why in a memorable way is so positive, and it really does help us drive choice, especially when you start seeing others start going, oh, I quite like what they're doing. Let's start imitating. So you continually need to stay true to that.
Thanks for explaining. So tell us a bit more about partnerships. So you've got to obviously make money, you've got to get income, but partnerships is a really important part of marketing now. So what does Dogs Trust do in that respect?
So, I think everything we do is about partnerships, because everything, as I said before, it's our donors that fund everything. We don't get any money from any other sources, whether that's individuals or corporates. We have several long-standing partnerships with some amazing organisations. The biggest of those is the People's Postcode Lottery, who've been amazing for Dogs Trust. I think our being in all 4 regions of the UK really helps that partnership, but they have been incredibly generous and over the long term to many millions of pounds funding our programs and our critical work. So they've been great. Same with Pets at Home. They've been with us for a decade, and they've been, they're giving us dog food to feed our dogs, which is great. And then someone like Pet Plan, we firmly believe that every dog, if you can, should have insurance, because it's that crisis moment where if an accident happens or something like that comes in that can lead to, I can't fund this operation to a rehoming. So if every dog is covered by insurance, and so Pet Plan have worked with us on that, and over the years, again, they've given us many millions of pounds of the partnership that we've had with us. So on a funding point of view, that's fantastic. But also, increasingly, we want to try and work with other charities in a partnership point of view as well. We've got 2 sort of lesser known programs in the outreach space where we're trying to help dogs and owners stay together. And in our opinion, one more dog staying with an owner is one less dog we have to try and find a home for. So the 2 areas that operates is, we have a program called Freedom, an amazing program which works in domestic violence spaces. Quite often, the perpetrator of domestic violence will single on the dog. So if you leave I'll attack the dog. So people stick around and continue to get the horrible conditions to protect a loved pet. What Dogs Trust does is secretly we'll take the dog, we'll put it into our foster network secretly so that you can't connect the dots, and we'll keep the dog for however long, whether that's 6 months, 8 months, 10 months. And when the victim has found a place, settled down again, restarted their life, we reconnect the two. But we work with all the domestic violence shelters, because most shelters, actually all the shelters can't take the dog as well. They can only take the people.
Yeah.
So we work with all of them and we connect, and it's quite a meticulous process of the handover day where we get it all worked out, and so the person can escape. So that's one program, is working with all the other different charities in the domestic violence space to try and make sure that we connect the dots so we get a positive outcome. And then the second one is our Hope project, which is about homelessness. We help in a couple of ways there. Most shelters don't like the idea of dogs, but a huge amount of homeless people share their lives with their best buddy, their dog. Yeah. I know you a lot of people walk past thinking, he's got the dog as a technique to try and get a donation out of it. But in most cases, that's their only friend. That's their long-term companion. Yeah. And so they won't go into shelters if they can't get the dog looked after. So we work with loads of shelters to try and persuade them to take the dog and help them and support them with that. And then the other one is, the other way is we've always helped with sort of funding veterinary care if essential, because it's the preventative stuff that doesn't really happen. And then there are other programs within that. So we work with housing associations to try and persuade them to enable them to take dogs, and rented accommodation to take dogs. More and more landlords don't really want a dog in their house on the fear that...
It's in a lot of rental contracts, isn't it?
Although it's not supposed to legally be that way, it is. And, no smokers, no dogs isn't unheard of in the ad. But we're trying to work with organisations and renting agents to try and remove some of the stigma behind that.
Great. Okay. A couple more things I wanted to ask you. One thing that a lot of marketers are talking about at the moment, in fact, Unilever have just pledged a kind of massive increase in investment in is influencers and ambassadors. So obviously influencer marketing is, still a massive growth area. How does Dogs Trust use influencers or ambassadors?
So we're, I know you're absolutely spot on, and charities really, really embrace partnerships with celebrities and influencers. We're Dogs Trust is very lucky to have the amazing Richard White leading on that for us, and I think we've seen a significant increase in our ability to reach out and engage people. The key for us has always been driving awareness and engagement at a lower cost. It really enables you to have a broad and really much broader reach at a far, far lower cost per thousand in terms of touching people. I think give you an example of how we've been stepping it up a little bit is, I don't know if Pete Wicks of Strictly Come Dancing fame has recently done a program with us for Dog's Sake on You, and the team absolutely adore you. You cannot get over the fact how much he loves dogs. He's almost part of the team, and he literally knows everybody at the centre of Basildon by name. But he's been shining a real light on the work of the centres, and it's fantastic. But it helps us in terms of reach. Being on a television channel for half an hour, previously I used to work at the RSPCA 20 years ago, and, animal hospital and pet rescue, you can't beat awareness of a program on mainstream television at every Thursday. And I think it was the top 10 rated BBC program for a decade. Now, they loved it because, of course, they could knock a program out for 40p, but from a charity, you can't buy that level of awareness. And Pete's campaign is doing the same thing for us. So not only does it drive that impact per pound, what it also does, though, is enable you to reach out to audiences that probably would never listen to your message. And for charity, we've got two pillars. Yes, awareness is great, and yes, awareness drives income. But actually, we also want to drive change and impact. And someone like Pete saying a few things about, have you ever thought about doing it this way? Or what about getting a rescue dog rather than getting that perfect Labrador? Is really, really important in terms of impacting their audience.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, because one of the things we talk about a lot is how you predispose more people to your brand, and definitely influencers and ambassadors of any type can kind of reach out to their own audiences, and with a slight different twist on the messaging, and increase, as you say, both sort of short-term return, but also increase salience as well. So that's amazing. Well, just to wrap up, Nick, thank you so much for this chat. Really, all very interesting, and lots of things that marketers of perhaps more traditional products can pick up on as well. But I want to end with a kind of future point. You've spoken about a lot of events that have happened over the last few years, big economic changes, big trends in dog ownership. What is the future, do you think, for charitable giving with all of this competition, and what does it mean for an organisation like Dogs Trust?
Not the smallest of questions.
No.
Okay, so I think probably start off with technology. As you're talking about that Trudeau quote earlier on, I really think, and it's really tricky for the older charities with legacy technology, but embracing AI and machine learning could really help us engage the audience more effectively. As I said, everything that Dogs Trust does is provided to it by the donations it receives. But we have to talk in a very broad brush approach to what we do, enabling AI into your systems to enable us to talk at a personal level about the programs that are interested to you, enables us to talk to you about outreach or freedom or hope, if that's the thing that's going to engage you. At the moment, we can't do that at a level of sophistication. And I think that would have a real boon in terms of driving engagement that drives longer term giving, and ideally going through to the idea of people giving a legacy. The second one I'd probably talk about is Greta Thunberg. She achieved a huge amount in terms of driving the environmental movement, probably far more so for a lot of audiences than Greenpeace or ex-vice presidents ever did. Yeah. The traditional charity model is something like, I hate this problem in the world, therefore I give you £10 to solve the problem for me. But Greta basically solved the problem herself. And if you think about it with that thing I was talking about earlier on about commercial sector enabling us to be good, I can become a vegan, I can buy a bike rather than a car, I can travel in the UK, I can buy locally, are all things that I can now start doing to actually have an impact on the world that in the old world I didn't feel empowered to be able to do. I can even go onto social media and actually reach out to someone in Gaza and start engaging with them and potentially helping them directly. So the role of charity is getting a little bit muddy, especially when I can buy things from people and do good through that. So I think, bearing in mind, as you said earlier on, that regular giving and legacy are the things that charities rely on, I'm not entirely totally sure that future generations of giver in the 10, 15-year spaces are going to want to give to charity in the same way. So charities are going to have to massively innovate to try and find more and more ways to engage, to bring people deeper into the cause. And if they don't, there are 200,000 odd charities in the UK. I think we're going to see a huge amount of closure and merger of charities, a little bit like the financial services sector over the course of the last 30 years. There used to be thousands, now there's only 2 or 3 life companies. And so I think that's a huge challenge. And part of that innovation for me is to sort of steal from the commercial sector like they're stealing from us. If I can give you an example, so charities are generally very good direct marketeers. They're fantastic at it. You've got a brand, a product that's created that's selling loo rolls to you directly that are ethical and good. Yeah. So why couldn't Dogs Trust become the leading provider of poo bags in the UK?
Yes.
And not everyone can because of the sector they work in. Dogs are the sort of thing where you've got 1 in 4 households in the UK includes a dog. Another 1 in 4 wants one. So we've got a huge amount of audience there, and people spend more on their dog, on feeding it, caring for it, treating it, going on holiday with it, than they ever give to all charities combined. So if Dogs Trust and other animal welfare organisations get a percentage share of that and become the largest provider of X, then potentially we can have more strings to our bow. We can move into the commercial space as the commercial space has moved into the charity space. Potentially, we protect ourselves and insulate ourselves against those changing trends.
You've been listening to Future Proof from Kantar and Side Business School. For all episodes and more information, visit kantar.com or oxfordfutureofmarketing.com. If you enjoyed this, please leave a rating and a review and subscribe on your favourite podcast app so you never miss an episode.